Hello, everyone. It's for me a great pleasure to welcome all you to the second semester of the probability of the Chilean probability seminar. Today, we have the pleasure to have with us Kerlyns Martinez from Universidad de Concepción. She's going to talk about stochastic models on how do you say in populations with the interactions and social components. But there is a better title there. So, Kerlyns, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you then for the opportunity to start the semester. So yes, I would like to present this work. This is a interdisciplinary work, in fact, and it's interdisciplinary because we have a lot of people that is working on biology and ecology, and this particular section of the work is more about the modeling and about some theoretical results that we found, and is joined with Hector. Mauricio, Leonardo Videla from SACH, and Isidora from Universidad Mayor, which is ecologist. So our context is so I would like to present the model. So first to try to grasp where the model is come from, like more or less the construction, what we had in mind, and then talk a bit about some of the results. So here we are in the context of coastal marine ecosystems. And in particular in Latin America, we have the Peruvian-Chilean trench, which is very important for fisheries, for industrial fishery. And one of the factor is in fact the Humboldt current that is more or less responsible for the transport of the nutrients along the coast. So it supports biodiversity, and then we have a lot of different species. So we are focusing in the Lesones picata, which is a type of algae. It's a kelp. So we can think in this brownish long algae attached to the rocks in this case. And in fact, it's a very important species. It's a target species here because it provides habitats for other species, food, shelter, but it's also used a lot in different industries, in pharmaceutical or cosmetic industry, and it's used also as a carbon sink. So it's absorbing a lot of CO2. So, and of course, we have a lot of harvesting of the kelp. So we can think, of course, in models, deterministic or just simple models similar to the Lotka-Volterra dynamics. So here we have two components because in any case, for us, it's important to describe a bit how is the population itself. So the population we can separate into structures. So we have the juveniles and we have the adults. So here we have like the two components of the population of kelp. For us, this is biomass. So we can describe naturally the way they grow and the way we have growth of or gain in the biomass and loss in the biomass. So the loss of the biomass can be seen as okay. We have the natural mortality for both juveniles and adults. We have loss in the biomass of the juveniles because they are growing, so the disc of the plant is getting bigger and they become adults. So we have that also that gain in the biomass of the adults, and of course we have new juveniles. So it's depending on the how much adults we have. So it's like small spores that are thrown to the ocean, and then they develop. They came back they attach to the rock, and the plants start to grow. So we have a growth rate here, which is just deterministic. And we have space competition in sense of we have the carrying capacity of the system. So as soon as the population is getting close to the carrying capacity, they can still grow, but they have like a limit growth rate. So this term acts like a limitation for the juveniles to grow if the total population is close to the carrying capacity of the system, which is also a deterministic value parameter. So we have the evolution of this dynamical system. We can compute explicitly the stable states. We can study the long behavior of the whole system. But so as I mentioned before, we have here destruction due to the harvesting, right? So we have the fissures, and it's not a mystery that if you allow people to take whatever they can, since this is a commercial activity, they of course can overfish. They can just take too much, and then you can have like a direct effect in the total biomass, and you can have even extinction of the species. It has happened, and so you need some regulations. So in this particular case for the kelp, we have some rules, or they have some rules, and among them, they cannot take everything in just one place. They have to take sparsely the plants. They need to remove the whole plant, otherwise it can get rotten. They cannot take juveniles, just a proportion of the adults then, and so on. So since this human effect, it's of course getting. I mean, you will have immediate effects in the system. Okay, we can take the same deterministic system and we can just remove an additional part of each part of the structure of the populations due to the harvesting, right? So we can say, okay, the ideal is to not take juveniles, so this should be zero, but in any case, you can have people that are not complying that rule. And you can take, of course, some part of the adults. So you will have a different dynamical system, a different behavior. You still can compute everything, but in any case, we are describing in that case the extraction of the plants as something deterministic, which is not true. It's not what is happening, in fact. And it's not true that everyone is exactly the 25% of the adults, for instance. So you will have some people complying and some other people that are not complying the rules. So we want to approach this problem as an open system, with an open system approach, say. So we can imagine that we have a graph. Each one of the vertices in the graph can represent a fisher, a harvester. So the state variable here, the idea is to say that if they are complying or not complying the rules. So we are considering the rules just as one big rule. So they will take the value 1 if they are complying the rules. Otherwise, they take value 0 for each one of the vertices, so size n. Everything is connected, the graph is complete. And actually, what we have here, if we think in the anthropogenic effect and in the behavior of the human, in fact, is that the decision can depend on how others are behaving, right? And it can also depend on the value of the biomass, on how much they see that they have available of the resource. So naturally, also, as soon as they affect the system, I mean the population will have a feedback. So the population will be affected, and then they can have a continuous feedback with this type of behavior. So they can mutate with their opinion. So for the compliance dynamic that we want to represent here, and then we want to see what is changing in the system. So we can think in the number of harvesters that are compliant. So we count and with a random clock with a certain rate. Each one of the harvesters will choose randomly a neighbor, so everything is connected here again. So they choose a neighbor, they copy the opinion of his neighbor or her neighbor, and they can actually mutate or change their opinion based on how the rest is behaving, for instance, an average, and also depending on the biomass itself, on the resource itself. So they have a certain probability to mutate, to go from compliance to non-compliance, or to go from non-compliance to compliance. And for the population dynamics, so we have, of course, the dynamic of the system, of the biological system. So we have the maturation, the juveniles going to adults, the new juveniles, the death or the loss of the juveniles, and they can actually be affected by the amount of people, of the proportion of people that are complying or non-complying the rules, the regulations. So with this, we can rescale the process, and we can prove actually that this rescale process is converging weakly to the martingale solution of this system. So now we are adding to the juveniles adult system. So we actually already choose the parametrization of the rates for the population. We are adding the compliance process, what we call the compliance process. So we have the two rates of mutations here, and at the end, the diffusion that we gain or got is right Fisher that is very common in the border problem. So here we truncate a bit the growth rate. So before we had the 1 minus the ratio, and we actually limited in order to have something that is not growing too fast, but it's just for convenience. So here we have the anthropogenic effect of the human in the system, but actually there are still some intrinsic uncertainties that can be seen as they are coming from the parameters, for instance, from the environmental conditions or something similar in the population. In the population, I mean in the kelp. So we incorporate this intrinsic noise through two Brownian motions independent on the Brownian motion in the compliance process. And the diffusion is chosen to be proportional to the biomass of each one of the population, subpopulation. So here we have three different Brownian motions. They are independent among them. And we have also the effects of the price of the resource. So we have a market. These harvesters sell they take the kelp, they extract the kelp, the kelp is dried, and then they sell it to some markets. So the prices of the market here is exogenous. So it's affecting the way the people is behaving, but the way the people is behaving is not affecting the prices. So it's not a complete feedback. So it's not affecting the price. So in fact, for us, the assumptions on the price are more or less very generous. We are being very picky with the hypothesis on the price. So the way we choose to parameterize, because in any case here we are talking about, okay, they can change the opinion based on the resource or the price of the resource, but how, right? So here we choose to describe this change of opinion based on three rules, decision rules. So we have the dependence on the abundance. So people that are not complying the regulations can pass to comply if, so a proportion of those guys can go to compliance if they see, for instance, that the biomass is very low. So if the biomass is very low, this will be close to zero, let's say, then this factor is bigger. So you will have more people worry about that everything is just running off, and they want to save a bit of the biomass, and they keep they comply the regulations. But if actually the people is complying the regulations, they see that there is a lot of biomass, so they are not that worried, so they can extract a bit more, and we are assuming that they have certain probability to go to non-compliance. So the decision can be also based in the price of the resource. So here, for me, here the delta is just like the indicator function. So for instance, this is easier maybe. If they are compliant and they see that the price is very, very low, so of course they make money of it. They live with that, right? So they will go to non-compliance because they need to extract maybe a bit more. Or if the price is super, super large, is super high, then they can become a bit crazy and extract more because they want to profit more. Similarly, if we assume that they are kind of in a sustainability program, so they receive some incentive in order to comply the rules and make everything, all the activity very sustainable. So they receive an extra amount, so an incentive. And then if that amount of money plus the price of the market is high enough, they go from non-compliance to compliance. And we add at the end a factor because so we are human and we behave probably as if we see that a lot of people is behaving bad, maybe we will tend to follow them. We will copy, probably. So that is just for the parametrization of the rate here, right? So we still have J, A, E plus P now. So P is just a model for the price. We are not pretend here to model actually like the price. We are taking a model, assuming that that's a model for the price of the kelp. But still, we have some uncertainty that we are not describing. So I mentioned the Humboldt current, which okay, we have cold water rich of nutrients here in the coast, but we have some events, ENSO events like El Niño or La Niña, that actually interchange the cold water rich in nutrients by warmer water. So it's not optimal for the system, right? Because it has less nutrients. So we will see an impact in the growth rate or in the biomass. But nevertheless, it's been observed that these effects are just short-term effects, short-term changes. So we can assume, we expect that it's not something that is going to kill the whole population, but you will have an impact. And these are not continuous in time, these are rare events. So we decide to include them, the effect, or to model the effects with a Poisson random measure, independent from the intrinsic noise, independent from the behavior of the harvesters. And then we have some intensity measure, some coefficients modeling the size of the jump or the effect of these jumps. So this is actually the whole system. This is our system. This is our model. So now, of course, we need to take care of the well-postness of the model. We need some hypothesis for that. Here, mainly, difficult part here is more like we have details, small details, but mixed. For instance, this thing can be seen as something is growing super linear, but at the same time, here is sublinear, more or less, because in any case it's kind of order one, but we have different behaviors, so we don't have any result that we can just apply directly. Of course, this is not Lipschitz, not locally Lipschitz, because we have problems around zero. So we cannot use direct results, but we can use the classical approach to prove that we have the well-postness of the system. So the hypothesis, naturally, so the rates are non-negative, of course, they are assumed to be bounded. Lipschitz. Similarly for the jump functions, it's called jump functions. We need some integrability, of course, against the intensity measure. We are assuming, for instance, it's natural to assume that the jump functions are linear in affine, in fact, in X, because we want to say, okay, there is some event that is killing but a proportion of the population. We cannot kill more than that we have. We need some hypothesis in order to actually prevent negative values in the population. So if there is a jump and it's killing part of the population, then we need to be sure, of course, that at the end we obtain something non-negative. Here, I think I didn't mention, but in the description of the drift for the process E, in the parametrization of the mutation rates, we have two constants. So this is a type, this is beta 1, beta 0 tilde. So these are more or less representing a proportion that can always behave good here or behave bad. So they can always comply or non-comply. So we are thinking in these two constants as something non-negative, as something extremely positive, in fact. So we need those constants to be large enough in comparison to the diffusion coefficient. And this is kind of a Sear type condition to have something away from the borders. That is actually how it's appearing, the condition. And for the price, for the model of the price, okay, we are assuming that this can be described with a stochastic differential equation. For instance, Ito diffusion, and the coefficients have nice properties. So, for instance, they are globally Lipschitz and the price is positive. Everything is well posed here because we are just using it in the parametrization. So, as I said, we cannot directly apply results, but we can easily extend the ideas of the proof for the classical well-posedness. So we obtain, under those conditions, we obtain a Markov process, which is a solution of the system and is admissible for us in the sense that biomass is non-negative and the process E, the proportion is maintained between 0 and 1. So we prove a priori finite moments. We have a priori finite moments by localizing the process. We also can localize the compliance process. So we have everything is Lipschitz. So at the end, for that localized problem, the martingale problem has a unique solution. And for the limit, we can actually use a lemma, comparison lemma approach. So we bound the process, the compliance process, by two processes. So we make a sandwich with the compliance process, and each one of the bounds of the sandwich actually gets away from 1 and 0 under the conditions for the beta tilde constants. So our process at the end is well posed. The E process is well posed. Everything is okay with it, and it stays actually between 0 and 1. That's what we want, because we don't want absorption in the boundaries. We don't want to say that everyone is behaving good and is stay there forever. So we want the process in the interior of the interval. And for the uniqueness, since we have, again, this competition, this interplay between the superlinear growth in the population components and the Helder continuity or the non-locally Lipschitz property in the diffusion for E, then we consider here a combination of norms, so L1 and L2 norm, because of those type of different behaviors. So with that, we considering a regularization of this norm, we can prove uniqueness as usual. We localize, we just use classical tools and prove that actually the solution is unique for almost every T. So we have a strong well-posedness. Besides, okay, the price is assumed to be positive. The E is between 0 and 1. with no absorption at the boundaries, and the positivity of the process, the biomass process, will be natural between jumps because we are asking for the jumps to not kill the whole population or more than that we will have at the end, and between jumps. So we can prove again with a regularization of the negative parts that in fact, if we focus on in the between zero and the first jump of the diffusion, then everything is positive. And after the jump, we are keeping everything well posed, so everything is positive, and we can just go on. So we have an admissible solution at the end, and a Markov admissible solution at the end. Okay, so we are saying that the biomass is not negative, which of course doesn't mean that it's not zero at a finite time. So we need a bit more to actually prove that the origin of for J and A is not zero zero, and I mean it's not getting to the origin. So for that here we can interpret the new assumptions. So it's a strengthening of the previous assumption on the phi j and phi a functions. So we are assuming not just that it's more or equal to zero, but it's strictly positive, and we have a bound for it. And here we are playing with the support of both jump coefficients. So this is kind of saying more or less that there is a proportion of the biomass of the kelp that is protected. So this, of course, this epsilon, epsilon 1, and epsilon are not. It can be as small as we want, but needs to be positive. It makes sense with what's really happening because again, for instance, these ENSO events are not killing the whole population, are impacting for sure, but are not killing the whole population. So there is still some population that is surviving to those type of rare events. So nothing too catastrophic. And we need some additional integrability uniformly in X just for convenience, in fact. And with that, we can prove actually that we can found a convenient convex function such that if we localize now the process that the biomass, we want now to see that the biomass is not zero, which actually will be the same as the whole, each one of them is zero, right? So we focus on the compact 1k, 1 over kk. And of course, as soon as k is getting, is going to infinity, we are considering the domain that we had before. And we can localize the process. So as soon as the process is between 1k and k, we can estimate the expectation of this convex function, which is just a combination between logarithms and identity functions. We can bound it independently on k. And not just that, but actually this function can be bound from below with a divergent sequence. So under the conditions that we have here, we know that if the process is exiting this compact, it can do it continuously. And if it's doing with a jump, if it's exiting the compact with a jump, it can do it. It's allowed to do it, but just it can go over k, not under 1 over k, because it's prohibited because of the assumptions here. So since the only way the process can exit the compact from below, which is the point that we are taking care actually, is continuously, then we can use the bound of the function g with the sequence ck, which is divergent again. And we can just keep the probability that exit time is finite. So here I'm just interchanging the t by an n. So since this is divergent, is the only way this is actually true is that the probability that the exit time is in finite time is it's just zero. So the population process the biomass process is not at the origin infinite times, which doesn't mean that it's not going to extinction. But for that, we need to take care of asymptotic properties, right? So for asymptotics, we need to control a bit more than that we have. In particular, we have control of moments, but we can easily prove that, in fact, we have uniformly in time control of the first moment, which is enough, assuming that we have the same for the price. So if we think in, I don't know, in a geometric Brownian motion, as Black-Scholes model for the price, this is true if the rate of return is not that strong in terms of the, in comparison with the sigma, the diffusion coefficient. So under this assumption, we can also prove separately this uniformly control of moment of the first moment. We can prove tightness, and with that we can of the transitions, and with that we have argument in order to prove that there is an invariant probability measure for the whole system, for the system, for the four coordinates, which is a Markov process. So if we want to see if the system is going to extinction or not, in fact, we can analyze it with almost sure properties or almost sure behavior of the trajectories. So if we again think in the deterministic model, actually, if we consider the whole biomass, so we sum both components, it's almost everything is negative except for the term here with the growth rate. So if in fact if the growth rate is not weaker than the loss rate of the biomass, everything here is negative, so which is natural. If you don't have much growth of the population and you have a lot of loss of the population of the biomass, then you will have just a decreasing population, and then eventually at the limit you can go to extinction. So in the stochastic model, we can prove something similar. So the conditions, of course, will involve the noise coefficients, but if mainly, so in simple words, if the growth rate is not strong enough against the death rates, the mortality rates, then we will have that the population is going to extinction. The biomass, the sum of J and A, are going to zero, and moreover is going to zero exponentially fast, almost surely. And this can be proven with the law of large number for martingales. So, as I said at the very beginning, this is part of a problem that came actually from Isidora, and it's more like it's not theoretical. Of course we need to take care about if it's well posed system, what type of theoretical results we can obtain from the system of SEs, but we want to actually simulate what's happening. We want to parameterize with some observations and then try to see what we can say about a specific case. In particular, in some caletas, I don't know how to say caletas in English, but in Chile. So we need we need a numerical approximation that we are sure that is convergent to the true solution if we want to maintain something close to the system. Of course, we cannot solve the system. So for the E, even just for the E process, since we have this square root and we have like two boundaries, the 0 and 1, the Euler-March lemma is not a good scheme. So we need to work with something else. So we follow the work of Kai, Hu, and Mao, applied to some epidemiological models in order to define an approximation that is suitable for us. So we need that the process E is between 0 and 1, and the approximation, I mean, the approximation of the process is between 0 and 1, and the biomass is positive, it's not negative at this. So for the process, what they do with the epidemiological system approximation is to use a version of the Euler-Maruyama, but it's a truncation of it. So since our problem here, in order to prove some convergence of the numerical scheme, is that we don't have locally Lipschitz property, and not even locally Lipschitz. So we need to get far from 0 and 1. So we truncate the Euler-Maruyama if it's lower than delta t and bigger than 1 minus delta t. So of course, as soon as delta t is going to 0, then we are actually considering the initial domain 0, 1. So the approximation of the process lives where it should live. For the biomass, something not similar, because we don't have an upper bound for the biomass, but we do have a lower bound because we want something positive. So we can use some exponentials in order to have something positive. So here, for the continuous part of the process, we have Euler discretization. So we freeze the drift, but in the diffusion, we let the diffusion to go with the approximation, with the time of the approximation. So it's implicit, let's say, but the good thing is that the continuous formulation of this scheme actually has an explicit solution, and the solution has actually some exponentials that we can use to obtain something positive. This is just the continuous part, but then for incorporating the jumps, we just check if between t and delta and t plus delta t there was a jump, and we include the first jump, just the first jump of the process in that interval. So we sample some random variable for the size of the jump, and we just include the term. Right, so as soon as delta t is going to 0, then we are considering the jump of the original process. So here, the explicit solution has a time integral. It's not that bad because it's a time integral, it's not a stochastic integral. But in any case, we need to implement this approximation. So what we do is just to approximate with the lower extreme of the integral. So we have an implementable approximation, which is again a combination of exponential functions, and then we can be sure that this approximation is positive if delta t is small enough in comparison with how big is this Vj. So here I separate, just for simplicity, the B plus and B minus is just everything that is positive in the drift and everything that is negative in the drift. So I know that these two are just positive, just to write less. So we have a condition on the delta t in order to have a positive output of the approximation. But in any case, of course, we need to study the convergence of this scheme. So we have kind of a truncation for the process E, and we have exponential type of approximations for J, and A is exactly the same. For P, we are assuming that we have a good enough approximation. So following again the idea of Kai Huan Mao, we prove the convergence. We don't have a rate of convergence, but the scheme that we are proposing is convergent to the true solution of the analytical solution of the system. So the idea, more or less, is to use Lipschitz property. So we truncate the analytical model. We define a modification of that system, where we truncate whatever is perturbing the Lipschitz hypothesis for the coefficients, and then we are constructing the subsets of the sample space where we can actually be sure that the process is not escaping those intervals. So for instance, we know that the process E is not 0, it's not 1. So we can choose for one epsilon, for a fixed epsilon, We can choose some delta that we know that the probability that the process E is in this compact or in this set is high enough, is close enough to 1. So under that type of reasoning, we do the same with the process J and N and A, sorry, because we know that they are not 0. And then for that system, since we already have Lipschitz coefficients, we know that the Euler-Maruyama is a good scheme. So we have the convergence of the Euler-Maruyama, and then it's just a way. It's just a way to travel from one approximation to the other approximation using exactly the same, exactly the that we control the probability that the process is here and the probability that the process is in the truncation, for instance, if delta t is small enough, and so on. So the idea is just to use the Lipschitz property and the convergence of the Euler-Maruyama. And construct these probabilities, these sets with a high enough mass. Okay, so the last thing I want to mention, in fact, so we went from the modeling, the analytical properties, asymptotic properties. We have approximation, time approximation, in order to be sure that we have a good enough simulator and we can simulate some scenarios and show people, I don't know, so show the fishers, the harvesters some scenarios and what can happen. In any case, we need to fit the parameters, right? So in the parametrization of the model with true observations, let's say we have a couple of issues because the amount of data is very scattered, it's not too much, especially with everything. But for instance, with the price, you can have you have a lot of variability in the price, and we fit with some observations, we fit the price with a very simple model, with a Black-Scholes model. It can be fit with another model. For the parameters, more biological parameters in the biomass components or in the biological components, we approximate the time that a juvenile is getting big enough to become an adult, and we use that information in order to choose the rate of the trespassing from juveniles to adults. We use some allometric rules, and we compare with some empirical observations in some reports in the literature, with some observations in Antofagasta, for instance. And with that, we choose a value for the growth rate of the juveniles. But in any case, we need to also choose the death. And when we were actually checking the death rate in comparison with the growth rate, there was something very weird about the scales. So we decided to use the observations in order to fit the values of the death rates, but with our model. So it's informed somehow by the model. So we have some during 2 years for each season of the year. So we have 9 observations, just 9 observations. We have the average biomass of the whole population, right? And we have information about the sigma, the variability of those observations. So with that, what we try to do is to use the model in order to simulate what can happen with some parameters, so candidates parameters for the mortality. We run the simulations, we compute the average of the of the simulations. We compare with the average of what we are observing, and the same with the variance. And we try to fit as much as we can. So we define a cost function, taking into account how far are the observed biomass and the simulated biomass, and similar for the variance. And we try to minimize, considering in any case that we want the death to be positive. So we want to avoid negative rates, of course, and also that in the protect area system, the usual is that the mortality of the juveniles is much higher than the mortality of the adults. So these observations are known that they came from a protected area, so you don't have any extraction. So here we are removing the extraction from the system, from the simulations, for instance. So with that, we're assuming that we have everything in the stable state, more or less, and then we use these simulations in order to try to be as close as we can to what we actually are observing. So I try to not fill the presentation with simulations because that's we have a lot of things to show, but we need to let something to the paper, right? So just to mention and not be too long. So the idea is then after doing all this work and having the something to simulate and the model a good model, then we want to consider full compliance, full non-compliance and dynamic compliance scenario and compare what can happen, what's the worst that can happen, so the full non-compliance, the best that can happen. So you have people extracting kelp, but with following the rules. And then what if people is just deciding what to do in terms of the biomass, of the price of the resource, etc. Right, so we parameterize some part of the rates. We simulate each one of the scenarios, so full compliance, everything is very stable and sustainable. If everyone gets crazy, of course, the biomass is getting, we will have extinction for sure. And if there is some dynamic between in the behavior, it's interesting because, for instance, we can see the extraction rate. So as soon as the harvester start to extract a bit more, then the biomass feels the effect, so it's going down. But since the biomass is going down, then the harvester actually needs to do something, needs to extract less or to follow more the rules. So they decrease the extraction rate, and you will have again the recovery of the population, which is the idea. So at the end, for instance, a subsidy, this incentive that receive the harvester can be treated as a control. So we could define a control problem. We want to do a lot of things, and we can do a lot of things in the system because, for instance, we are not considering dependence in the space. We can have everything is instantaneous, so which is not necessarily true. We can have some delays in some of the coefficients. We can describe more accumulative behavior. So we can do a lot of things in the model, but the idea is to propose a model starting from a Lotka-Volterra model, deterministic model, but that this model is taking into account anthropogenic dynamic, so the effect of us as humans, and see what can model says at the end. So that's all.
Thank you very much, Kerlyns. Let me change my view. Okay, so are there any, well, first, we thanks Kerlyn for talk. Are there any questions?
I will stop sharing.
No question in the rooms? I have some, but it seems unfair. Oh, go ahead.
Thanks, Kerlyns. I have a question. In your model, n was the number of people fishing for this little n,
Mhm.
and in a martingale limit on a graph, I think you have n going to infinity, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask if n is finite. I think all the um, can your results be extrapolated when n is large but finite?
So we didn't try to describe like interacting system, but just like the mean field limit, because we wanted to describe like the proportion of harvester that were complying the rules. So at the end, our focus was to use the limit dynamic, but for sure to try to study the finite size system can be maybe even better in some sense, because also maybe it's easier to try to describe the compliance of each one of the regulations, which is more complex for sure, but we didn't try to study the finite.
Okay, so fraction was the
System.
interesting part in your work.
Are there any other questions?
Can you do like I guess you can do like some, I don't know the name exactly, viability analysis. I guess you can, in the sense that you could estimate for different, I don't know, parameters the probability of having your system above some, I mean the bit biomass above some level for sufficiently long time. So I guess that it's something that you could would also do, at least numerically, But
Yes.
theoretically, because you would like to control also the system in the so. I mean, this is something that ecologists are interested, or you could answer with the model.
So what we are doing now is exactly to consider some parameters that has like nice interpretation. For instance, the subsidies, the syndicalization rate. We have some syndicalization rate. So we are trying to measure at long times how a modification of those parameters are impacting in the long behavior. So what if you put a more subsidy? What is happening with the system at a large time? But numerically, but for sure, theoretically, is also interesting. But right now we are doing it numerically.
Mhm. And the what do you say, the unions, no, los sindicatos, how do you
Sí,
do
los sindicatos.
you discuss with them? I remember here at CMN some years ago,
Sí.
the Rusa, but it was not Stochastic, but they had a project in Valparaiso. I don't know how it worked with the with the fishermen, but how is it with
Yeah. So I think for sure I haven't. Me, I haven't. I have no contact with any harvester, but for sure I think the idea, for instance, for Isidora, is to try to make this simple enough in order to try to transmit the idea to the harvester.
okay.
Just to complement, in fact, Isidora, the ecology in the group, she made a lot of contact with fishermen, and she made some pools, and some of the parameter of the models has been taken from those pools. For example, at which price is so low that they will just get anything they can because they need to eat, you know. So and the other point about a little bit the implications. The original project was to be able to say something to policymakers. So how to do
Mm.
policies to get sustainable exploitation of the resource. So in some sense, I think that the answer to your first question, Joaquin, is yes. Yeah. Okay, Hernan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for your nice talk. So I would like to ask about the stochastic modeling concerning to the bands, the restriction on the periods of restrictions.
Okay.
Yeah, some ideas in order to incorporate in your stochastic modeling on the equations.
So I remember that we start considering like an extra variable, let's say, kind of turning on or off depending of its band to extract or not. And honestly, at some point we remove it, but I don't remember why. But we start to consider like in the parametrization of the extraction to have an extra process, a V process that is dynamic and is kind of saying that if it's just 0 because they cannot, or if it's 1 because they can extract.
Okay. And another question concerning to the tricks in order to improve the Euler-Maruyama method. I remember some modification of the Euler-Maruyama method in the context of the SIR model, Cox-Ingerson-Ross model. You know about that trick? So for example, to put an indicator function to the square root, or to put, for example, an absolute value of the previous computation.
Yeah, you can have the symmetrized Euler, yes, or go with something with the higher order, like a Milstein or symmetrized Milstein, which is the work of Hector, in fact. But so the tricky part is that when we try to compute the convergence of the whole system, because it's not just the SIR type of dynamic, it's also the superlinear behavior of the biomass. So when we were trying to prove the convergence, then that interplay between those type of behavior is not so easy to control. So the easiest thing for us this time was to try to make everything Lipschitz, which was the best thing was to try to just truncate. But you can define symmetrized.
Yes, concerning to the weaker assumptions of the coefficients, I remember, for example, that the tame Euler scheme that gained attention during the last decade is a method that you modify the drift part in order to gain convergence. Yeah,
Yeah.
the tame Euler scheme. Mhm.
Yes, that can also be used. We choose the exponential type of scheme in the case of the biomass because we wanted something positive. And in the truncation of the Euler, in fact, help us also to have something between, because it's not just positive, but also between 0 and 1. So we can control it very easily. But for instance, for the dammed Euler, I think it can be used also, but you need to take care of the output should be always positive for the J and A. And with the dammed Euler, it's not enough.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other question? It seems it's not, so I would say we thanks Kerlyns again.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Ker. And with this, we end our first talk of the second semester. So be attentive. We have come back.
Yes. So next week we'll have 2 people. So we will